Our featured speaker this morning, Chris Theodore, is a graduate of the University of Michigan, where he earned his BS and MS degrees in mechanical engineering. In addition, Chris also earned his MBA degree at Michigan State University. At U of M, Chris led a team of students that designed and built their first car, a Wankel-powered urban vehicle. His love of all things automotive led to over 4 decades in the industry. Chris had 2 tours of duty at Chrysler. From 1975 to 1980, Chris worked in advanced chassis on such projects as the T115 minivan, Chrysler Calspan research safety vehicle, and turbocharging. He returned to Chrysler in 1987 when Chrysler acquired American Motors, working in Jeep truck powertrain, minivan powertrain, the minivan and small car platform teams, and ultimately became VP of platform engineering before leaving Daimler Chrysler in 1999. During the second tour, Chris also worked on such programs as the Ram 8.0 liter V10 and Magnum engines, minivans, Neon, PT Cruiser, Viper, and Prowler. Chris' career included specialty car manufacturers Cars and Concepts, ASC, Celine, and Legend Industries, along with Detroit Diesel, American Motors, and Ford Motor Company. Chris is currently president of Theodore and Associates, an automotive consulting and engineering firm. He participates as a judge for the Motor Trend Car of the Year, SPE Plastics Award, and Altair Lightweighting Awards, along with various classic car shows. Chris maintains an eclectic collection of cars from a 1959 Nash Metropolitan to the 2004 Shelby Cobra concept, and continues to work on new patents and automotive projects. Chris lives in Birmingham with his wife, Tracy. He also has a summer home in the Thumb area. Please welcome today's featured speaker, Chris Theodore.
When Joe Huber called me, I was a bit surprised, asked me to come speak, because I got a confession to make. When I left Chrysler the last time, I kind of felt like a traitor, because I really love this company. And as you'll see, I was kind of a dyed-in-the-wool MOPAR fan. So can I point here? This way? Or? Yeah. Oh, great. This thing works super. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. One, my history as an employee and observer. I want to go down a quick trip down memory lane, if you will. And if I get too long-winded, just do the Bob Eaton roll. Whenever he couldn't come up with a word, he'd start muttering in management meetings and rolling his hands. And that's about the only thing I did understand from Bob. We'll get to that. Secondly, you all know Chrysler has a boom or bust legacy and a tradition of talented, dedicated survivors, and we're all here to attest to that. And many of you expressed interest in the future of the industry and Chrysler specifically, and I want to talk about both the short term and the long term because they are in fact different. I started out as a MOPAR fan at a very early age. My dad had a 51 Plymouth, and about, I don't know if you can see that picture. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, can we get the lights down a little bit? That's me, and probably about 7 or 8 years old, but a couple years before that, I damn near gave my dad a heart attack when he found me jacking up the left rear of the Plymouth trying to change a tire. And that's a car guy from a young age. We had a 54 Plymouth. My mom's first car was a Belvedere. And then I convinced her to buy a 62 Fury, and I inherited the 56, but I never got it running, and my dad took it off to the junkyard. But I was fascinated with Chrysler from the very beginning. I read Walter P.'s biography and the 3 great engineers, Greer, Skelton, and Zeter. I was 7 years old when the 57s came out. Very seldom has a company ever totally replaced its entire product line. The 57s, I should move it. There we go. The 57s, every car was redesigned that year completely. Set the world American styling on stage with the forward look. Fins became the thing. But on top of that, they were engineering marvels too, the torsion bar suspension, and Chrysler was always a leader in a lot of features. Unfortunately, Tex Colbert was also the CEO at the time, and there were accusations that he had interest in some suppliers, and maybe that's why the interiors would degrade in the sunlight and the cars rusted out, but that's another story. It still was a tremendous accomplishment what was done there and impressed me as a kid. The other thing two things impressed me. My mother, when I was young, I don't remember how old I was, but I was fairly young, Highland Park Technical Center. Okay, that doesn't work that way. Does it work this way? Oh, I'm pushing the wrong button. The Highland Park Technical Center, you all remember that. They had an open house when I was a young kid. My mother took me down there and I was blown away. And one of the gentlemen was here a year ago. I remember being impressed by the glass drop fixture. I don't know if you ever saw that at Highland Park where they drop a steel ball bearing on the windshield glass to test the stiffness of the glass. And I thought, wow, this is really hot ticket company. And I don't know, it impressed me as a little boy, I guess. But the other thing that impressed me is I used to write Chrysler letters about I was fascinated with the turbine cars, starting, in 54, the first turbine car. And Chrysler would send me back technical, and this is before Xerox, I mean, booklets that were published, and hand bound with all the technical features of the 54, the 55, the 62, and then of course the 63, one of them was driving around in my neighborhood. And in fact, I did my science fair project on that turbine car. I was just blown away by everything Chrysler was doing. And then, 1963, I'm 13 years old, and you got Richard Petty and the HEMI. I mean, if that doesn't impress anybody, I was pretty special. 63 was Lynn Townsend became CEO, and he did some interesting things. He wanted to expand internationally, made the great decision to acquire Roots, Simca, even the Greek Farmobile. I couldn't find a picture of that. It was like I'm Greek, but it looked like it was designed by the Greeks. And I bought my first share of Chrysler stock. Believe it or not, it was around $80. It split 2 for 1. I said 1 for 1. 2 for 1 typo. I didn't catch that one. 2 for 1 stock split. And of course, during the second recession, I sold it for $5. And my policy ever since with stocks is buy high and sell low. So, and if you think about, this is just in my lifetime, the boomer bust legacy, the 74 gas crisis, the 78 gas crisis, the loan guarantees, and so on. We'll talk a little bit about each of those. I'm going to go fast because I know you want to know a little bit about the future, and you can always ask questions. I actually started at Ford Motor Company because my professor had gotten me an internship there. But after the Great Recession of 74, most of you in this room probably remember the Thanksgiving Day massacre when they literally laid off the entire engineering staff, and which is why the Volare turned out to be a problem-prone vehicle. But they started to recover in 75, and they were creating an advanced group. Randy Edwards was part of that group, and we had a nice little team, and we worked on some neat stuff. Worked on the K car, the minivan. More importantly, set up a small team to do the research safety vehicle with CalSpan. Went over there with John Rasback as my boss, and Bob, and names escapes me right now, and body engineering has passed away. But I learned a lot about a small team working together, building the safety vehicle. Rasback told me, Raz is back there somewhere, taught me everything I know about chassis design. And quite frankly, I didn't want to go back to the big Chrysler. So then I got I convinced the government. Oh, I skipped something I got to go back to in a second. I convinced the government to, with the help of George Ball, to give me a contract to turbocharge the safety car for fuel economy. And so I did that for the next year. And unfortunately, I guess I gained a little reputation for knowing something about turbocharging. Actually, I worked with Al Fields on that, and got hired away to go sell a twin turbo project to DeLorean, which was not the best career-making decision. The other contract we had was with Fiat, and we turbocharged the Fiat, and a year later they withdrew from the American market. So John did his drug deal, and I was looking for a job. I wanted to say two things. I wanted to back up because back to the turbine car. I collect a lot of Chrysler memorabilia. I was walking through my neighborhood one day. There was a garage sale, and I walked into the garage sale, and what did I see but a picture of the '63 turbine car. Now, I don't think I remember Howard Hollister, who retired on July 31st of 1980. I don't know if any of you know, but I do recognize some of the names. And in fact, this is a gift to Tom Asmus because he's one of the signatories on this. So pass it around. If any of you else of you signed this, take a look. The second thing I wanted to say, I just went to the premiere of the DeLorean movie, which is entitled Framing John DeLorean. And I worked with John. I sold the turbocharger program to him, and he was a charming con man. And they got the story right in the movie. If you're interested in the true history of John DeLorean, go see this. It'll be coming out June 3rd. So it's a fascinating movie. A couple more things on there. You know, Sperlich came to Chrysler. And then actually when we were working on the research safety vehicle, Iacocca came to Chrysler. I remember running into Hal when I was working on the government, flying to Washington on the government turbocharging program. There was Hal Sperlich and telling him, hey, get those loan guarantees. And he was off doing that. And in fact, Lee saved Chrysler and deserves a lot of credit for what he did. And I still say he's one of the two best communicators I've ever experienced. The other one was Ronald Reagan. Those guys could say anything and you'd believe it. And they said good things to say. After we went broke with DeLorean, I still kept my eye on the Chrysler revival, and I ended up at Harrison Concepts. So we worked on we built the LeBaron convertibles and even did a Daytona T-roof. Some of you may recall it did leak though, so you can blame me for that. And then Iacocca went on his buying spree with Gulfstream, Lamborghini, and American Motors. And by that time, I had ended up at American Motors, so I found myself back at Chrysler again. And then came what I call the Camelot years. And this is, to me, is the best time in my career. Lutz led the product revival. The Knights of the Round Table were, you know, Francois Castaigne, Tom Gale, Stallkamp, Pauley, Papert, and others. We moved into the new technical center. We laid out so that everybody would run into everybody at all times. Teamwork was emphasized. We set up the platform teams, and we had a lot of fun. This was a shot that I had. We did the first visual fly-through with 3D glasses through a neon that we'd assembled digitally, and nobody else in the industry had done that at that time. And we had a lot of fun flying. We literally flew through the intake manifold and out the exhaust pipe. And it was kind of interesting. You know about the great products. I had good fortune of working on some of them. I did get to work on, we started with the 8-liter V10 for the Viper, and that got me into talking to Shelby and talking about doing aluminum V10 for the Viper. The second picture up here, if you can see it, is actually my daughter, my oldest daughter, sitting in a Viper that Roy Schoberg had let me to take to the U of M football game. She was head of the tuba section, and you can see we're still U of M fans. Also got to work on the Grand Cherokee, the Leapfrog minivan, if you can see it. Oops, now I got to back up. The Leapfrog minivan right there. We had to fight Bob Eaton to get the PT Cruiser approved. He didn't want to do that. And of course, the Prowler. And then there's all the other great products that all the other people worked on, the Concorde, the Intrepid, the Durango, the Dakota. It was an onslaught of product, and it was a great time to be at Chrysler. Before that, Jason said I had to mention this. And I guess if you have questions later, I can tell you some fascinating stories. But before that, there were no new Chrysler products. And so we had a brand new transmission called the A604 that we put across all the cars simultaneously. And marketing decided we've got nothing else to sell, so let's give this transmission a name. We called it Ultra Drive, and they started failing left and right. We can go back into some of the stories later if there's time. Let me just say, it almost put the company out of business. I was part of trying to help keep it together. If we had had to recall those transmissions all at once, it would have cost the corporation, I think the number was $2.2 billion, and we only had $1.6 billion cash on hand. The great thing is, in the end, we took care of every customer. They basically got a lifetime warranty, and we solved the problems. It took a long time. There wasn't one single problem, but we did right by the customer, and that allowed CAMELOT to happen, quite frankly. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a Chrysler. I got to credit Joe as well, because one of the many problems with that transmission, the torque converters weren't worth a damn, and Joe fixed that plant up single-handedly, I think. So that was a great job. Then Eaton and the merger of equals. I've got a lot of stories to tell you. Maybe if you're interested, we can talk about some of those. Basically, Eaton sold out. The company started to fall apart the year before the sellout. Talked about teamwork. Bob was kind of insecure, I guess, and arrogant at the same time, and wanted to run the company himself, so he pushed Lutz to the side. And then, in a brilliant move, he told all the executive vice presidents, one of you is going to replace me. And instantly, teamwork went out the window. Everybody was running for office. Then we had the merger of equals. And what can I say? I actually got along well with my counterparts at Mercedes, and actually offered to work for the vice president of engineering. But when I went to Seville, Spain, where they had the first management meeting, it was a disaster. Bob Eaton started crying, and that's the second time I saw his crying routine. Announced he was going to retire. Shrimp was in charge, drinking heavily, and not the nicest human being you ever met. And you know the rest. Bob Eaton abdicated, cashed out the next day after the sale. I hung on to my shares, according to my normal policy of selling low. The losses mounted, and the layoffs were massive, and it was just a tragedy. And the sad thing is, here the company had moved on to become one of the premier auto company. And I remember the management meeting when Bob took over. He said, we got to do the next thing. So we had this offsite up at Garland. We talk, and finally Bob Eaton gets up. This is the first time he did his crying routine. He says, and our new motto is, you remember, create products people want to buy, own, and buy again. And then Bob Eaton said, I've got it. He takes all of that and he puts and more, because he didn't have a clue where the company wanted to go. And I think that's the reason we ended up with a merger. He wanted a way out. Well, you know that. It's kind of sordid history. I like Dieter Zetsche. He came to the rescue briefly for Chrysler, and even when times of layoffs, he managed to boost morale, which was really low. A couple good things happened. There'd always been a desire. There was no sharing between, as you know, between Mercedes and Chrysler, even all the talk of synergies and all that stuff. Everything I worked on, that shit can, sorry. Finally got to use the E-Class, and the team realized the dream of the 300, which was a great car. Bob Lee, who had stolen to go work on the DeLorean Turbo, had returned to Chrysler, and we got the HEMI. But I gotta say, Dieter made a few questionable, I like him wonderfully as a person, but he made some bad mistakes too. Staffing choices. Wolfgang Bernhard was not my favorite guy. And I think he was a pretender. Didn't really understand cars. Cost reductions were terrible. And many of the cars were on an obsolete Mitsubishi platform and just weren't competitive, the best of which was probably the Journey. And then, Dieter put the company up for sale. So that wasn't the best of all things, but it got worse, right? Then the Nardelli Cerberus debacle starved the company for cash. We hit the Great Recession, more massive layoffs. the three CEOs went to DC, and yeah, Wagner got all of them got crap for flying there, which should have learned from when Iacocca had to go there, and Spurlick went there. And Mullally, of course, was sitting there happy because Ford had made the right move and gotten the money, so they weren't begging for anything. But I got to tell you, Mullally said, "Who is this guy Nardelli? He doesn't know anything." And he just made a fool of himself. Worse yet, after he destroys the company, that magazine picture in the right, he says, "Well, I could have saved Chrysler." No, you were the guy that destroyed Chrysler. So, and I never met an ex-GE guy that knew anything. GE's just, they talk a good game, but I've never found a good businessman that has a history of GE. And I think if you look at all the former executives that left GE, they have not had stellar careers. I did watch the decline as an observer closely, in that over the years at ASC, we did work on the Viper Coupe. We painted all the Vipers up until 2008. Assembled some of the Ram SRT V10s, did the Jeep Liberty Skyliner. Yeah, that did leak once in a while. But I did see the devastation of the layoffs. And I remember coming to CTC for meetings, and I mean, the place that I knew and loved, I mean, you could shoot a cannon through the place. It was, and kind of the teamwork structure had been broken down. And obviously pensions and benefits were a risk. People were getting hurt, not just through the layoffs. And yeah, I did become an NCRL member, even though I got a Ford pension, because I know how, when I saw how people were being hurt. And thanks to the NCRO, I get my $62 a month American Motors pension check like clockwork. So there you go. Now we did the decline. Let's thank God for Marchione. I only met the man once, and so I got to tell you the story. I saw, you know, he came on board. I watched everything. I was still very close to Chrysler. I saw the team put together a 6-year revival plan. I saw the team members, you know, working 24/7. They were on call all the time, and they worked their butts off. And it was kind of like a recreation of the product revival that we had earlier. And the success was the Jeep, Ram, and minivan. Now, I won't tell you Marchione did everything perfect, but I did run into him. It was funny. I ran into him at Costco at lunch hour on a weekday with his wife, and they were looking at some electric pianos, and this Chrysler security guy recognized me. He said, "Let me introduce myself." So I went to introduce myself to Sergio, and said, "Hey, I used to be there, and you're doing a great job." I said, "But I know you're working the guys really hard. Don't work them too hard, or they'll break. Done a great job," he says. And finally he looks at me and he says, "Yeah, I know they're working hard, but I'm working pretty hard too." And we know that's true. It was a great loss. He had to make some sad decisions, like Chrysler 200 was a good car. It came out too late. I'll explain. You heard I do judge Car of the Year every year with Motor Trend with Tom Galen. We'll give you a couple stories about that. And of course, Viper had to pass as well. Not everything was right. A lot of money was spun off or sent to Fiat's way to, you know, revive, fix Fiat, bring Fiat to North America, which was probably a mistake. And you know, if you don't know Bill Gowling, whenever Chrysler was in trouble, he'd get a phone call, "Can you take a couple thousand cars?" And Bill would do it, whether it made sense or not. Will you take Fiat? Yep. He opens up a new dealership, took Fiat, overpriced, undermarketed. And then money got deferred to Alpha, and the Alpha program took too long. And some of the product programs that we're going to talk about got delayed, so Chrysler could be doing even better. The good news is Alpha is gaining strength. And in fact, 2 years ago with Car and Driver, I mean, the Alpha Giulia is a fantastic car. We voted it Car of the Year, and I hope it shows up one day underpinning a Chrysler product, and the same thing with the Stelvio. So all in all, you got to give this man, he gave his life to the company, and and saved it. I wish he could have reaped some of the rewards. I do not know Michael Manley. I've never met him, but I will say Chrysler is very well positioned among the Detroit three. The Jeep Gladiator, this is something we've been trying to do. I mean, I worked on the Jeep Comanche. This is something we've been trying to do for 20 years. It's finally here. It's fantastic. It's going to sell like hotcakes. The Wagoneer is coming, and perhaps another large SUV as well. I was talking with Lutz a month or so ago, and we just marveled that we thought we were so great when we got Jeep up to 200,000 units a year. Now we're talking 2 million units. The Ram beats Silverado in sales. Who would have thought that? Pacifica, is the best Pacifica. It's the best minivan they did since we did the Leapfrog. And the one good and bad thing is the hybrid Pacifica, the plug-in hybrid Pacifica is the best green car on the market, and nobody knows it. So if I had to criticize, now they'd probably lose money on every one, but you can buy a Chevy Bolt for $3,750, or you can buy a Pacifica plug-in hybrid minivan, go wherever you want, still drive 20 miles or so on electric only for the same price. And it's not being advertised or marketed at all. And I think that's a crime. The 300 is still a great car, and I do have a confession to make on that as well. Tom Gale and I were judging the second generation 300 when it came out. And because we're both ex-Chrysler, we felt a little bit guilty that we might show bias if we voted it for Car of the Year. If either of us had given it the #1 vote when the 300, second generation 300 came out, it would have been Car of the Year. And if Chrysler had given us a hybrid Pacifica, it would have won Car of the Year 2 years ago as well, and they couldn't get us one. So that's a shame, missed opportunity, because both great cars. Okay, so now we move. I know most of you want to talk about the future, and there's 3 big trends. 1 is electrification. 2 is all you hear about is autonomous. And the third thing, and was alluded to earlier, I'm sure some of you worry a little bit about industry consolidation, because that's going to be an ongoing trend. Well, electrification, that's an irreversible trend. It's going to continue. It's expensive. It's unprofitable. I gave begrudgingly Elon Musk Car of the Year. I voted for it, as did everybody else when the Model S came out. It's a great car, but I told Elon when I met him, I says, great car, but you're losing money on it. Car costs more to make than you're selling it for. Well, I'm going to take care of that. In the next week, he did raise prices. But as you know, they really have never made a profit. The market demand for electric vehicles is still lagging what's coming. So that's going to be a challenge. And Chrysler's kind of keeping its toenail in the water, and that was probably a good financial decision, but you got to do a little more and keep a toenail in there. But in many ways, it's wise too, because you don't need to be losing money now. It's kind of like, what was it, Popeye? I'd gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. Well, it's kind of like I gladly pay you today for a hamburger someday. So, autonomy. I do believe in autonomy. It's going to save lives, okay? And the other good piece of news is when our kids take our car keys away, we'll still be mobile. So, so that's something to be cheery about. Well, I am talking to retirees, and I'm a fellow, and I'm a car guy, but I know someday they're going to take my car keys away, if I live that long. Now, autonomy is overhyped. Progress is overhyped. It's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I can talk about hundreds of issues that they haven't even thought about yet that have to be addressed. Nevertheless, it's going to happen. Manufacturers, other than Chrysler, are spending literally billions, and the returns aren't going to come for a long time. And if ever, and we'll talk about the if ever part, because things are going to get different. The other arrogance of the auto companies, in particular companies like General Motors and Ford, and Mercedes-Benz and BMW is they think they can do software better than, you know, Google or Apple or anybody else. We know that is a lie. It's the same road we went down with how many love their corporate navigation system. We can't even make a navigation system in our car work as good as anybody's navigation on a cell phone. What makes you think you're going to win the software war with autonomy? It's not going to happen. You're going to lose. Why are you spending these billions of dollars? Why not partner? The winners, so Chrysler was very smart to partner with Google Waymo, and I give Sergio credit for that as well. And you do have, I hope they're learning for free and really monitoring all the issues that are going on with the Waymo vehicles. Now, guess what? Nobody ever tests a Waymo vehicle against a Apple vehicle. Wait until they have software wars. Imagine yourself in a bunch of Google cars and an Apple car has got more aggressive software, so it can cut you off. I mean, they haven't even talked about, they haven't tested that yet. But it's coming. What's really, when they do come, the guys that are going to win are going to be the software suppliers and the service suppliers. And I'm looking at Bill because a couple of winners could be dealers and rental car companies. If I were, I'd be getting, you know, Ford and Chrysler made mistakes getting into the rental car business, but in the future, think about this. When cars start being used 24/7, somebody's got to clean the barf out of them. Somebody's got, you know, got to maintain them because they're going to get more miles, and they have to park someplace. You know, they're not going to be to be serviced. And so there is a service industry to be had and a delivery industry that's money to be made. But manufacturing, that's going to be a different story. I predict, and I've been predicting now for well over 5 years, that by 2050, driving on public roads will be banned because they'll say you're no longer allowed to drive a lethal weapon. And that's going to happen. I won't be around to see it. You won't. Most of you probably won't be around to see it either, but it's going to happen. Maybe not in the United States first, but it's going to happen. And like horses, the cars that car guys like me and many of you know and love, they're going to be relegated to car farms like, in fact, the car condos at the M1 concourse. And we're going to, just like people like to go see their horses, we'll go see the cars we really like at our car farm. Industry consolidation is also inevitable. To be a long-term player, there's going to have to be a major presence in North America, Europe, and I say Asia, but I'm really saying China. It need not to be feared, but you have to be smart about who you consolidate with. So we've got examples of good mergers and bad mergers. You know the bad ones. And I got to say, coming from AMC to Chrysler, that was a win-win for both sides, even though there was some issues along the way. So let's get into a few specifics. Chrysler in the short term. The good news, Chrysler is best positioned amongst the Detroit Three, honestly. This is not just playing to the crowd. Profitable without wasting billions on a delayed future. That's key to the success. Jeep is global and growing. That's successful. Ram is growing. There are risks. The future of the Chrysler and the Dodge brands, you got to wonder. But then you got to wonder about all brands. Chrysler is lagging a bit in technology, and they're going to have to develop strategic partners like they did with Waymo. Make sure that they're strategic and they get the equal benefit. And should there be another gas crisis, Chrysler is buying Elon Musk's credits to sell their less fuel efficient vehicles. So there are some risks, but still, if you assess the overall big picture, Chrysler's in pretty good shape in the near term. And in fact, there was one more thing I was going to say, and my dementia is taking hold, so we'll go to the next slide. Yeah, it's in this next slide. Long term, all auto companies, and by that I mean manufacturers, are going to suffer. The big days of the big profits will be gone. The profits are going to go to the service suppliers. Just like the profits aren't in the phones anymore, the profits are in the service. And it's questionable as to how well the auto companies, they're doing all these goofy experiments, especially Ford and General Motors. But people that are doing it haven't got a whole lot of business sense, I got to tell you. And so I think that's going to be a challenge when you think of people like Google who've invaded and Apple and Facebook who've invaded our lives and know our every move. They've got a hell of a head start in that. And think about it, Uber valued at twice Ford Motor Company. Pretty bizarre. All they do is lose money and give you a ride from one place to another and stiff their employees. Now they want to get rid of their employees. Think about this. We talk about brands. That's where I was going to go. Ultimately, all these cars are going to be little Tupperware bodies floating around on skateboard platforms. They're all going to be alike. Imagine BMW's ultimate driving experience. Well, it's not going to accelerate any faster, corner any faster, stop any faster. They're all going to march in lockstep unison. So what differentiates the brands? It's going to be styling and interior features. And think about the stuff that's going to go away. All this technology we're adding in. Ultimately, airbags are going to go away. Crash structures are going to go away. Even a lot of these sensors that they're putting in, they're going to find out. Once every car is autonomous, the problem's a whole lot easier to solve than when you have to interact with crazy human beings on the road. We could solve the autonomous problem tomorrow. All you got to do is ban pedestrians and human-driven cars. So the future there is going to be different. I do think Chrysler is going to survive, and it will thrive. It's going to be a different business model if they can be the low-cost producer of these platforms and these Tupperware vehicles. And because they haven't spent their billions on fool's gold, they have the potential for being that. So don't want to be a Debbie Downer on it. I think there is a long-term future for Chrysler. I'm going to be back up for one second because I did skip over whoops, backwards, Chris. I did skip over consolidation a little bit as Chrysler. You've seen the talks as was alluded to. I think the thing for Chrysler is to pick smart. I can't tell you, I haven't spent enough time thinking about who might be the best to merge with eventually, and I don't think we know yet. I would be very leery of the Renault, Nissan getting involved in that mess. There's been talk of Peugeot, and Peugeot actually got a pretty brilliant new leader now, but it doesn't satisfy the criteria of any Asian presence. So I don't know that the synergies are there. The one that, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but the one that does seem to make a little sense to me, well, and surprisingly, you don't know this, but I was competing against Geely with not my money, with somebody else's money to helping a private equity company try and acquire Volvo. Li Shufu did buy Volvo. They gave him their reign. Volvo's doing quite well. Geely is doing quite well. And they're introducing new cars and growing in China. Something like that might be a more logical consolidation in the future. So I think I've said everything I have to say, other than to make a shameless plug, just like Jason. I do have a book coming out. It's I do own the car in the picture there. It was one of the last Shelby Cobra that I developed with Carol at Ford. And it's about my times with Carol. And there is a chapter, it's coming in the fall. There is a chapter on it that's dedicated to Viper, Chapter 2. And I got to thank Bob Lutz for correcting my English. Roy Schoberg providing input. Dick Winkles is here. He provided some interesting stories along with John Fernandez. Joe Gallagher tried to credit every member of the team whose name Joe could come up with. Neil Hanneman, Charlie Henry's here too. So they all contributed to at least that chapter in the book, and I thank them for it. So with that, we'll open it up. I don't know if we had, did I go long? We'll open up for questions. Or maybe I put you to sleep. Thanks for laughing at my jokes anyway. Anybody got a question, or we cover it all? Not that I have good answers, by the way. I think we're done. No? Yes? Wow, I thought I'd stimulate some controversy. Oh, yeah, we got one in the back. Okay. And then one over here. Randy's got one. Oh, that's the cookies. Are the cookies any good? Somehow we killed 3. There we go.
Yeah, I'd just like to know if anyone has any idea how the electrical grid is going to handle the future of electric cars.
Inadequately. And it's a funny thing. I mean, there's so many things we don't address in this country. One, the grid's not ready. We know that. 2, I mean, all we're doing is as long as we continue to use coal burning power generation, all we're doing is transferring the CO2 load from one place to another. 3, all the greenies refuse to admit that the right way to do this is with nuclear power. So we're kind of in this, yeah, we're marching towards an end. All I can say is I think things will, along the way, they'll start to figure things out. But it's going to take longer. I mean, the charging stations aren't there. There's a lot to go through, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen, but it's not going to happen nearly as quick. The market demand's not going to be there. 2050 will probably be all electric. And personally, I don't believe in the fuel cells either, because think about the infrastructure. First of all, you can't crack hydrogen cheaply, although I know Tom Moore is working on that. Can't crack water to get hydrogen cheaply. So hydrogen's expensive. 2, there's no hydrogen infrastructure. And 3, the damn fuel cells are just adding another cost component to the vehicle. So I think it is going to be electric, but it's going to be a long process. So, and batteries still got to come a long way. Yes. The cost of electricity is cheaper than gas. That's real. Okay, and there is a significant savings there. So, and anybody that owns an electric vehicle will tell you that. Now, it's fair and it's not fair. I mean, right now the electricity is not taxed. We tax the hell out of gas. I heard somewhere I read there's one state or one city is, I think it was the state says they're going to charge, if you own an electric vehicle, you're going to pay a $1,500 a year tax because you're not paying for the gas tax. So it'll merge closer and closer together. But
Ted, you mentioned 24/7. Cars will be highly utilized. Usability will be more important. Usership will be more important than ownership. That is going to cause a decline in car demand enormously, because if you look at today's, most cars that you see on the road are parked. They're underutilized. So that's a challenge that we need to face.
that's why you have to be the low-cost producer, quite frankly.
Yeah, but, and also reduce your break-even point.
Yep.
And reduce your size.
Exactly.
There are a lot of challenges ahead. It's a big transformation.
No, it's going to
enormous transformation.
I agree. It's going to be a huge challenge, and it's going to be very difficult for all the auto companies. It's not going to decline as much as they say, but it's going to decline. And there will still be shared vehicles, and there will still be privately owned vehicles too. And there will be levels of shared vehicles.
That's true.
I can still imagine a bunch of autonomous Rolls Royce running around. They're still going to be going no faster than anybody else's, but you know, people are going to have to differentiate themselves one way or another by class. So, but yeah, the volumes go down, and that's good for the world. Less resources and so forth. So, Tom. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, Tom. Randy's got it. I observed, let me tell you, I'm probably telling you some things I should know. I have not worked for Tesla. In fact, they tried to hire me a couple times, but I said no because I didn't want to work for anybody that's losing money. I don't believe in working on losing propositions. And maybe they'll win in the end, but he's still one step ahead of the sheriff. They just threw another $2.7 billion at him. I mean, because we'll see. But it's amazing that he's survived this long. But I have not worked with Tesla. Rivian, I kind of watched from afar. I will say about Rivian. One, the CEO is a bright guy, an MIT graduate, not a flim-flam man. Two, he stayed very low-key and quiet. He started out with a crazy idea of doing a mid-engine electric vehicle. He quickly realized, not so quickly, but he realized not to do that. I watched the prototypes get built because they happen to be built in a shop that I work with. Tom Gale was on the board of directors. He just resigned from the board of directors from Rivian. As you have read, Amazon did invest. Let me say a couple more things. They've done a relatively good job engineering the Rivian pickup and SUV. Amazon did invest $500 million. Ford also invested $500 million just recently. Don't know anything about other than what you know publicly. But if you think about Amazon, here's the interesting thing. Amazon is a company that, I don't know, first 10, 15, 20 years of its life never made a dollar, right? Now they're the largest capitalized company in the world. They bought a company or bought into a company. That company building those electric pickups or vans is going to be underwater just like Tesla, you know. But they buy 35,000 vans a year for Amazon's Prime delivery service. So Rivian's going to have their own market by their boss, and their boss doesn't care how much he's going to have to pay for electric vans to deliver his product. So they have a pretty good chance for a business model survival that way by the contributions of Amazon. Ford is going to be interesting too to see what happens with that. I think they're looking at the lucrative. If you look about autonomous, electric, everything else, it's all about the businesses first coming and transportation of goods locally. So there may be something there. That may have been an expensive proposition, and we know sometimes that the partnerships can work and sometimes they can't. So we'll see. Tanya?
Well, I saw you made a comment it wasn't designed to have an all-wheel drive version of it. But I keep hearing they're going to have all-wheel drive.
Yeah, I just read what you have as well, and I think that's great. I mean, the funny thing is when you talk about all-wheel drive, we did do an all-wheel drive minivan, as you remember, on the T115.
Of course, I had 300,000 miles on one.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, when you think about buying four-wheel drive vehicle, you can talk Jeeps all you want. But when you're talking on public roads, in the snow, there was nothing more stable than an all-wheel drive minivan with the long wheelbase. You could go anywhere, do anything. So I hope they are coming back with it. American public still doesn't get all-wheel drive. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, they buy SUVs, but they don't know what they do, and they don't use them for what they're capable of doing.
Electric motor rear drive system?
I have no idea. Now, that might make a little more sense. They've already got the battery pack. They've got the hybrid. They could throw an electric motor back
We were
there.
advocating that for years. I was trying to verify that's what they're doing. They're very tight-mouthed about it.
Well, I'm sure one of our retirees can find out. Anything else? Yep.
We will have millions of unemployed truck drivers.
Well, number one, there's a shortage of truck drivers. So I don't think 5 years is going to happen. It's just not going to happen as fast as I think it's going to happen. I mean, It won't. It's just, yes, there are going to be autonomous truck schedules. But think about, you know, everybody says, oh, we're going to be all autonomous. If we mandated, let's say we could have autonomous cars tomorrow, they're all there. If we mandated that every new car purchased has to be autonomous and electric, it's still 10 years to turn over the car park, 10-year transition. If it was mandated, and you think there's a person here with or without a gun in their hand that would allow that to be mandated, the answer is no. Same thing's going to happen with the truck. Yes, there's going to be a transition, but it's going to come, you know, very slowly. And wait till the lawyers get involved. That's one of the one steps back, right? All you need is, well, we've already seen some of the lawsuits that are going on. So that's why the U.S. will probably be one of the lower application rates, even though we're working on it so hot and heavy. So yeah, there are not going to be a lot of unemployed truckers. There ultimately will be a transition. There's no doubt about that, and that will ramp down. So, but that I'm talking long-term transition.
Chris, the auto business has always been boom or bust. Right now, my marina is chock full of new boats. I was there in 2008 to 13 when the marina was not even 30% full. How do we survive these times with the economy? And I think you kind of answered it, but that was the question.
Well, you know, the economy's strong and that's wonderful, but we know it is going to slow down sooner or later. And we haven't got a clue. Nobody does. There's all sorts of things going on in the world, and any one of those disruptions could turn everything on its head. So who knows what that's going to be. The United States is in a pretty strong position right now. And I think barring one major catastrophic event that nobody has control over, I think there's pretty good level of comfort that we're good for at least another year. And so that's about as far as that crystal ball goes, you know. I'm not an economist, but all right. These are just opinions. Like I said, the answers could be wrong. Anything else? Are we done? Well, I really appreciate.
Chris, we have one over.
I think some guys want to have cookies.
Question. What bothers me is how do we recycle all these lithium batteries? They're not cars and so forth. I've looked up online and it looks like the best method is burning it.
Well, I don't have an answer to that. I do. Necessity is the mother of invention. The lithium batteries are here. We're using a lot of lithium material. Battery technology is going to change. They're working on a lot of different batteries. Who knows when? They're always just like other technologies are always just around the corner and then they never come. But the other thing is they are looking at these lithium batteries. They are, and I've seen this now, they are starting to reuse like automotive lithium-ion battery packs. They're reusing them for others' charging forms. They can't perform for the charge and discharge rates required by electric automobiles, but they can continue to be used for many, many years as energy storage devices. So again, there could be a very gradual effect while people figure out what the hell. I mean, market stays like it is. Somebody's got to figure out how to get the lithium back out to create another lithium-ion battery pack, just like any other raw material. So I don't have an answer. I've not researched it. Can't answer it for you, but they'll figure some of it along the way, or it'll be a new battery. Well, I think you guys are tired. You got a sugar coma from the cookies, and hopefully you got some. I really enjoyed that.